Firestar's Quest is a landmark book in the Warrior series, not just as the introduction of a new and very intriguing group away from the four clans, or even as a bridge between the first and second arcs that tells part of the story we skipped over, but as the first super edition. These longer-form books have since become staples of the series, so it will be very interesting to see where the tradition started, even if this isn't the most loved or hated book in the series. Firestar's Quest was released on August 21st of 2007, about 3 months after Secrets of the Clans, and that difference, along with the new lore given out in this book, explains the noticeable omissions from that first field guide. This is yet another first for the series, the first Super Edition, which is a type of supplemental material defined mostly by its length, significantly longer than a regular main series book. These Super Editions will most always have a single point-of-view character for the entirety of their book times, and often focus on characters or time periods that didn't get explored in the main series. None of these, save for the length, are hard and fast rules, but they are things that came to be expected from Super Editions over the years. Firestar's Quest specifically was written by Cherith Baldry, and it must have been a daunting task to take on the longest single piece of Warriors content so far, with 38 total chapters and 510 pages of writing. We'll see how she did. Because Firestar's Quest takes place in the space between the original series and the new prophecy, rather than comparing its allegiances to the site, I will compare them to the allegiances from the Darkest Hour. On that front, Greystripe replaced Whitestorm as deputy, Darkstripe left ThunderClan and was killed, and Thornclaw and Ashfur were made warriors. With those changes, along with a couple of she-cats joining the Elders, ThunderClan has 9 warriors instead of 10. Also, Mousefur is, for some reason, now listed above Longtail in the allegiances, as the highest warrior on the list. Remember, she was a new, young warrior in the first book? With Thornclaw, Brightheart, Ashfur, and Ferncloud being promoted, and Tawnypaw leaving to join ShadowClan, Bramblepaw is now the only apprentice remaining from the Darkest Hours group, but Sorrelpaw, Rainpaw, and Sootpaw have joined him, apprenticed to Sandstorm, Cloudtail, and Thornclaw respectively, though technically Longtail is mentoring Sootpaw for the first couple of chapters. Willowpelt has moved out of the nursery, but Ferncloud and Brightheart have both moved in, so there are 2 queens, and Frostfur and Goldenflower moved to the Elder's Den. But Smallier passed away, so there are now 5 Elders rather than 4 in ThunderClan. In the other clans, Blackstar has taken over for Tigerstar as ShadowClan's leader, with Russetfur as his deputy, and Littlecloud took over for Runningnose as their medicine cat, since Runningnose became an Elder. Mudclaw became WindClan's deputy since Deadfoot passed away, and Mistyfoot became RiverClan's deputy after Stonefur was murdered and Leopardstar took back control of her clan. There is also a curious addition to the allegiances of this book, clan listings for both the modern and ancient versions of something called Skyclan, along with ancient versions for the 4 clans we're aware of. I'll spare you the trouble of listening to every one of them in list format, since they're all new characters that we'll be introduced to over the course of the book. The cast size for this book was 75 cats, which is actually a pretty average size as far as the super editions will go. That said, it feels like a much smaller cast, since only half of the book is spent with each smaller cast, half in ThunderClan and half in the Gorge. The top 10 characters here have 79% of the lines, and aside from Firestar having a massive percentage of that, the rest of the lines are split pretty evenly across Sandstorm, Cinderpelt, and a bunch of the new and prominent cats in the group this book introduces. 44% of the cast is she-cats, and they get 34% of the lines, which is actually one of the highest percentages that a Tom-led Super Edition ever gets. But a lot of the cast are cats that we have never met before, so let's begin with the story, and we'll meet them as we go along. The prologue opens with a scene from ancient times, when Red Star led ThunderClan, Birch Star led RiverClan, Swift Star led WindClan, and Dawnstar led ShadowClan. A gathering occurred at Four Trees, and the 5th clan, Skyclan, was late. When they, led by Cloudstar, did arrive, it turns out that they brought their entire clan, because Two Lakes have taken over too much of their territory and they can't live in it anymore. Cloudstar begs the other leaders to give up some of their own territories, but one by one they all refuse, Red Star especially, and Skyclan is instead driven out of the forest. Cloudstar is forced to leave his mate Birdflight and his kits behind since they are too young to travel, and he declares that Skyclan will never forget what the other clans, or StarClan, have done to them by ignoring them in their most desperate moment. Back in the present-ish day, we meet Firestar once again, 3 seasons after he became leader. He is giving Bramblepaw his assessment, and despite somehow still having lingering worries about his parentage, Firestar agrees that he has passed. On their way back to the ravine, though, he witnesses the pale shape of a grey cat who disappears before Firestar can discern any details. After a poor night of sleep, both Sandstorm and Greystripe are worried about him, especially considering no one else has seen the cat that he did. Firestar brushes it off, though, and makes Bramblepaw a warrior, naming him Brambleclaw and choosing to honor his courage and loyalty. But yet again, Firestar sees the gray cat, this time as a silhouette in the clouds, and starts getting visions of a large group of cats in a territory he's never seen. While he tries to track down a reason for this, we learn that Brightheart is expecting kits, see Longtail's eyes scratched and swollen by a rabbit, and see Brambleclaw and Tawnypelt's first gathering as warriors. Firestar sees the whole group of cats again at the gathering and decides to go to the Moonstone and ask StarClan directly about what's going on. He visits Ravenpaw Barley on the way and then makes his way into Mothermouth. Meeting with Bluestar, he is first asked if he would be willing to walk away without any answers, which he is very much not. But it turns out that, out of shame, StarClan has been hiding this information for generations. The existence and exile of the fifth clan, Skyclan. Firestar assumes that this must mean Skyclan has been appearing to him because they want him to save them. But Bluestar argues against this. Skyclan's territory is still gone. There isn't any room for them. And he couldn't, as ThunderClan's leader, abandon his clan for a moon or more to chase after a long-dead clan. Bluestar tries to use the 4 trees, 4 clans argument again, this time in favor of keeping one of the clans away, and Firestar gets even angrier than he was before, definitively making the choice to go and save Skyclan. Somehow. After Sandstorm and Greystripe try to ask what's wrong, and we see Longtail isn't getting any better and is losing hope, Firestar has another dream of Skyclan, this time interrupted by Spottedleaf, who tells him that if he is meant to help Skyclan, he will be shown how. The next morning, Smudge comes to say that he thinks he has to live in the forest with Firestar since he's been getting dreams that Firestar recognizes as being about Skyclan. Firestar reassures him that he can stay as a kitty pet, but decides to spend a night sleeping in Smudge's yard with the new kitty pet Hattie who lives in his old home, to connect better with the Skyclan cats. This was once Skyclan's territory, so Cloudstar is able to reach him, though he doesn't give his name since it's been so long since anyone used it. Cloudstar tells him his side of the story, with a fair bit more vitriol towards StarClan and the other clans, and explains that Skyclan broke up and scattered a long time ago. He asks Firestar to go and rebuild his clan from the loners, rogues, and kitty pets whose ancestors were Skyclan cats, and says that he waited for Firestar specifically since he needed a strong leader who wasn't born in the clans that drove Skyclan out and hid their history. Firestar returns to ThunderClan, approves of Thornclaw's offer to take over for Longtail and mentoring Sootpaw while Longtail is healing, hopefully, and goes on a patrol where a badger attack occurs and Willowpelt dies, saving Sootpaw. That night, in his dreams, Silverstream offers him a fish, which may or may not provide any sustenance in the waking world, and also encourages him to go find Skyclan, subtly and through analogy to her and Greystripe's relationship. Longtail still isn't doing any better, also agrees to Thornclaw training Sootpaw, and Firestar takes Greystripe and Sandstorm into the forest alone to finally tell them all that's been happening. They briefly believe he's leaving them to go back to his 2 legs, considering how he slept in Smudge's yard, but he explains the truth of the situation, and Sandstorm demands to go along with him to help Skyclan, dropping in the insecurity she holds that he still loves Spottedleaf more than her, an idea that Firestar really doesn't do a good job of refuting. Cinderpelt gives Sandstorm a crash course in healing herbs, Firestar tells the clan he and Sandstorm are leaving, but not why, and that Greystripe is in charge until they get back, and after a last goodbye with Greystripe, they set off. Typical journeying ensues, some hunting, running from a dog, a quick conversation about whether Firestar would give up ThunderClan territory now to house Skyclan in, he does not answer, by the way, and lots of walking through fields, across thunderpaths, and along a river. Along the way, Firestar doesn't listen to Sandstorm's ideas multiple times, and acts closer to a mentor with a brand new apprentice than a mate when he does let her do things, which makes Sandstorm angry, especially when not listening to her gets their shelter flooded in the middle of the night. Sandstorm again accuses him of not wanting her there, and wanting Spottedleaf instead. Firestar says that they're both important to him, which, again, is not the right answer, but it's enough to make her stay. But then, Sandstorm also gets trapped across the river from him. Her being lost leaves Firestar terrified and desperate, and makes him realize how much he loves her, more than he cares about their mission, even. Firestar comes across a group of loners named Stick, Cora, Cole, Snowy, and Shorty in his search to find Sandstorm, and it turns out that Shorty actually saw Sandstorm in a tussle with the 2-leg. Thanks to the loners, he and Sandstorm reunite soon enough, just in time to save Firestar from a couple of angry kitty pets, and they continue onward, much more unified and happier than before. After some more travel and a couple of Skyclan dreams pointing the way, they arrive at the Gorge that shows evidence of cats having lived here before. They don't find anyone there now, though, until a couple of young, rude kitty pets shoot pebbles at them as they sleep, and then run away. Failing to find anyone else, other than a rogue that Firestar gets in a disagreement with over prey, Firestar and Sandstorm decide to see the kitty pets the following morning. It is now Chapter 17, and we will finally see the first conversation with a Skyclan cat-to-be. These guys are a brother and sister named Boris and Cherry, and they apparently expected someone else, an old cat who goes to the Gorge every full moon that they call Moony. When Firestar and Sandstorm learn that he talks about StarClan and comes to the Gorge on the full moon, they quickly decide that they have to talk to this cat, and so soon they do. After making Boris and Cherry promise to stop bullying cats. Mooney is the last descendant of Skyclan who follows their traditions thanks to his mother's teachings, and his real name is Sky. After taking some time to himself, Sky shows them around and tells them more about Skyclan, particularly the Gorge and their resources. Firestar is ready to leave, seeing as the clan is gone, but Sky demands that he stay to rebuild Skyclan, and Firestar eventually agrees, deciding to start with Cherry and Boris and giving them a lesson in hunting, storing, and sharing your food. It turns out that they have long and powerful legs like ancient Skyclan cats did, so Firestar decides that they are good fits. Cherry and Boris actually had lots of fun with them and returned for more the next day, so Sandstorm and Firestar each take one of them for the day's training, with Firestar telling Cherry all about who he is sure are her ancestors, ancient Skyclan. It takes a while for them to agree to leave their two legs, but the next morning they do, and Skyclan has its first two apprentices. Firestar and Sandstorm go out to search for more cats, coming across a mother named Clover trying to protect her kits, Rock, Bounce, and Tiny, who doesn't want to fight at all, a fierce, standoffish, and authoritative rogue who eventually gives his name Scratch, who seems to just want the power a clan could offer, Sky himself, who doesn't believe in the cats Firestar has found so far, and then some kitty pet connections from Boris and Cherry. Oscar, who wants nothing to do with them, Bella, who doesn't want to leave her two legs, Hutch, who seems open to at least learning more, and Rose and Lily, who can't imagine living without the comfort of blankets and creamed chicken. With Scratch, Firestar also finds another rogue Tom, who doesn't want to be ordered around, a she-cat named Leaf, who helped them fight off the fox the previous day, and who agrees to come to the meeting for the possibility of safety in numbers, two grumpy old cats named Lichen and Tangle, only the former of which agrees to even hear them out, Patch, who agrees to find out more, considering it would mean company, and Rainfur, who decides to come to the meeting but isn't sold on the idea. The next day, Firestar climbs up the rock pile and tells all of the cats who came to the meeting about what it's like to live in a clan, to grow up and support each other, to train, rise up, and keep each other safe, to follow the leader, deputy, warrior code, and StarClan. Clover is the first to agree, for the sake of protection for her and her kits. Sky joins her soon after, followed by Cherry and Boris. Lichen decides to leave, uncomfortable in a large group, and Rainfur follows, unwilling to be ordered around all the time. Leaf joins, though, excited at the idea of having a purpose in their lives, and Patch and Hutch hesitantly agree as well. Oscar, however, only came to see how mouse-brained they were and never intended on leaving his housefolk. Still, Firestar and Sandstorm aside, that's 7 cats, along with Clover's 3 kits, who agreed. But this clan is small, and without a leader and deputy or a medicine cat. They have some work to do. Following a day of training and normal clan activities, Firestar gives naming ceremonies to all of them, naming Scratch Sharpclaw, Patch Patchfoot, Clover Clovertail, Hutch Shortwhisker, Leaf Leafdapple, Cherry Cherrypaw, apprentice to Sharpclaw, Boris Sparrowpaw, apprentice to Leafdapple, the kits Rock Kit, Bounce Kit, and Tiny Kit, and Sky Skywatcher. Sharpclaw really wants to be clan leader, but they're waiting on StarClan side to decide. Skywatcher pulls Firestar aside to thank him and give him a prophecy for long in the future. One we've heard recently. There will be 3, kin of your kin, who hold the power of the stars in their paws. This prophecy startles Firestar, but he doesn't have long to contemplate it as their duties continue, including deciding on and settling Skyclan's new borders. When they return, though, they find that Skywatcher is dead, leading to Skyclan's first vigil. Shortwhisker is very hesitant about all the things clan cats have to do and isn't particularly skilled, which makes him more self-conscious and unwilling to practice in front of others. He eventually gets the hang of it, though, where Clovertail hasn't attended a single training session. Bouncekit accidentally stumbled into, and almost drowned in, a very special cave, the Whispering Cave, that Firestar discovers has connections to the warrior ancestors. Rainfur comes back asking for help, since his mate Petal and their kits, Mint and Sage, are growing weak, and they're trapped in Petal's two-leg nest. Skyclan launches a rescue mission for them, and take all of them back to camp. Knowing how much they helped them, Rainfur decides to stay with Skyclan, for a while at least. A patrol was attacked by tons and tons of rats, and Patchfoot came out heavily injured. They go back with Firestar to fight them, and Firestar has never seen this many rats in his life. So that's not great, especially considering it was rats that drove ancient Skyclan out of the Gorge. Sandstorm is having trouble treating Patchfoot until Spottedleaf comes in to tell them that burdock root is best for rat bites, and to show them how to apply it. It is at this moment where Sandstorm finally learns that Firestar has been seeing Spottedleaf in his dreams since he became a warrior, which she doesn't take especially well until Spottedleaf steps in to say that Firestar does love her, and that what Spottedleaf and Firestar had was far too short and forbidden to amount to anything. It's a really sweet moment of reprieve after everything in this book, as well as the first arc, but Spottedleaf undercuts it a bit by whispering outside of Sandstorm's earshot that she wishes things were different. Skywatcher, in Firestar's dream, points the way to Skyclan's medicine cat, a kitty pet named Echo, who is already aware of everything and ready to join them immediately, thanks to having her own dreams, so she joins Skyclan and starts training under Sandstorm. Skyclan has its first gathering where they discuss apprentice training, think of how to deal with the rats, and name Echo, Echo Song, Skyclan's official medicine cat. After a few days of battle training, specifically in how to deal with the rats, another rat attack, and a quick detour about Echo Song wondering if she has lost her connection with her ancestors, she has not, Firestar names Rainfur and Petal, now Petal knows, full warriors of Skyclan, and they take the battle to the rat's own nest. There are a lot of rats. Seriously, a lot of rats. And one of them is speaking the cat's language. Rainfur is caught in a pile of rats, and Firestar loses a life trying and failing to save him. Sandstorm could only save Firestar or Rainfur, and she knew what her choice had to be. Firestar has noticed the talking rat twice, as has most of Skyclan, and they determined that killing that rat would probably cause the rest to scatter. Despite this, Spottedleaf decides to whisper in Firestar's ear, "Not many, but one," an allusion to the fact that the leader rat is keeping them going, something that they already knew, and Firestar still takes it literally, doesn't understand, and kills the leader rat anyway. So nothing at all has changed in their relationship and its useless fake prophecy since the first arc. Having won the battle and lost Rainfur, Skyclan returns to the Gorge, and Shortwhisker decides to leave the clan. Echo Song finds a dappled leaf indicating who should be leader, and she and Firestar bring Leaf Dapple to the Skyrock. Leaf Dapple says she trusts Firestar, if not StarClan just yet, and has her 9 Lives ceremony with Cloudstar, Skywatcher, her mother, and Spottedleaf. The leaders of the other clans in Cloudstar's time come to apologize and pass on their own lives. And finally, Birdflight arrives with Cloudstar's kids, giving Leaf Dapple her last life and finally reuniting with her mate. Cloudstar forgives StarClan and the other clans. Fawnstep, Cloudstar's medicine cat, offers Echo Song some wisdom. They see Rainfur again, and everyone welcomes Leafstar, the new leader of Skyclan. Leafstar appoints Sharpclaw as her deputy, makes Cherrypaw and Sparrowpaw warriors, Cherrytail and Sparrowpelt, and makes Patchfoot, Cherrytail, and Sparrowpelt mentors to the new apprentices, Bouncepaw, Rockpaw, and Tinypaw. They thank Firestar and Sandstorm for all they did, and finally, after some goodbyes, the ThunderClan warriors are ready to go home. 3 moons later, Firestar and Sandstorm are back in ThunderClan and curled around their new kids. Sandstorm chooses the names Squirrel Kit and Leaf Kit, and Firestar thinks once more about the prophecy Skywatcher gave him, and the possibility of these new daughters having that power. Seeing as Firestar's quest bridged the 2 first arcs, a fair number of previously off-screen events were shown in this book. Longtail being blinded, Willowpelt dying to a badger, and Brambleclaw's warrior ceremony, for example. And it was definitely nice to have this extra content. As for Longtail, okay, to the book's credit, almost all of the hopelessness about his future is said by him, about how he'll never get better, will never again be a warrior or train an apprentice, and doesn't even have one good eye now like Brightheart does. All of the cats around him are instead trying to be encouraging and insist that he isn't finished yet. But, at least in the mind we have, Firestar's, the hope seems to come from Cinderpelt being able to heal him, rather than Longtail finding a way to continue on despite his injury. The book cuts to Skyclan before he joins the Elder's Den, but it seems like, from this dynamic, he chose to retire himself, since Firestar vehemently declares that he would never abandon Longtail. I'm just going to hope that this choice isn't as bad as it could have been. What most people remember from this book is the formation of Skyclan, but that entire section only takes up a little more than half of the book. The first 10 chapters are devoted to catch up on what's happening in ThunderClan in this period, along with the persistent mystery of what Firestar's visions are about and what happened with Skyclan. And then another 5 chapters catalog Firestar and Sandstorm's journey to the Gorge. This mystery isn't particularly engaging to us as the readers, since the solution, that Skyclan was the 5th clan driven out by the others since their territory was overtaken by Two Legs, was revealed to us with nothing hidden in the prologue. That said, it is interesting to see Firestar's reactions to these revelations, especially when Bluestar tries to defend the decision to drive Skyclan out. Given what Bluestar felt about WindClan's exile, I doubt her behavior in this book was in character, but it was, at least, representative of what most of StarClan probably thought. Without question, though, being in the Gorge and meeting all of the different potential Skyclan cats is the most interesting section of this book. The cast size is pretty small, all of them have distinct identities, and quickly gain a fair bit of camaraderie and chemistry with each other. It was an overall more political than action-packed plot, but it was a nice one to read about. Skyclan definitely feels like a real place by the end. Between its history, the ancient cats apologizing and forgiving each other, reuniting as the leadership of the newly invented clan is established, and the new clan cats working together, bringing each other in, training, and learning as they adjust to their new home. By the end, Skyclan is easily in the most unique and somewhat vulnerable position among the other clans, and its small but interesting cast of characters gives a lot of intrigue to look forward to in any other stories that may contain them. But the most relevant addition is of course the original telling of the There Will Be Three prophecy, that is the central point for our current main series. And now that the supplemental material is out of the way, I'll finally be returning to see what that prophecy might entail in the next episode of our trip through time.